Hey everyone, welcome back to a basic guide to Warhammer 40k, a universe so dark that the prizes are the true spawns of chaos. Today we aren't going over a 40k army, but the very game you will use those armies in. Now, we aren't going to cover advanced rules or mission objectives, we are only here to teach you the basics of the game and break it down so newcomers don't feel overwhelmed or confused about the basic mechanics. The reason why I want to do this is because most videos here on YouTube are for people that understand the game fundamentally or are already experts waiting to see new updates for their units. Plus, I want to give something to the wife so they can finally play orcs without getting frustrated by the game. So, what do we need to play the game? Well, we need our rulebook, which you can download for free online, our Armies Codex or data sheets, models to play the game, a tape measure, or something to measure inches in, and a good number of 6-sided dice, which we will just shorten down to D6 to speed it along. It can also help to get yourself some D&D dice sets so you can help keep track of things going on in the game. We also need a 40 by 60 inch table and some terrain. The terrain is any physical object to represent differences in landscape on the board, and can be anything from official stuff, fan-made stuff, or some random stuff you have around the house. Now that we have everything we need to play, let's begin teaching you guys the game.
One debt to society later.
When playing a game, you and your opponent will go through this series of events during your respective turns. The command phase, the movement phase, the shooting phase, the charge phase, and finally the fight phase. A lot of these are pretty self-explanatory, but I will break them down for you.
There is passive aggression in the air!
Before the game starts, both players roll to see who goes first. The player who rolls the highest on a d6 wins, and they will be the first to deploy a unit into their deployment zones. The players will take turns deploying units one at a time until they are both finished. Then roll initiative again to see who takes their turns first. The second initiative winner will go through all the phases until finished, then the other player will do the same, completing a whole round.
Your math is no match for my gun, you idiot!
The command phase is the start of a player's turn. During this phase, you and your opponent will receive one command point, be able to activate abilities allowed in the command phase, and roll leadership checks for your units. Don't worry about leadership, we will get to that later. Command points are used on things called stratagems, special abilities that can influence the game. Basically, spend command points to influence the game during either player's turn to either help you or hinder your opponent. That's all there is in the command phase. After that, we jump into...
Must go. My planet needs me.
In Warhammer, your units will have their own stat cards. These tell you everything you need to know about the unit, from how tough they are, to their weapon stats, and how brave they are. But here in this phase, we care about the movement stat only. This stat tells you how far a unit is able to move, and some units move way slower or way faster than others, but they all measure distance moved by their movement stat, which will be listed as the number of inches you are able to move when moving normally. However, what if you need to get somewhere faster? Well, you can choose to advance a unit if that's the case. You advance by rolling a d6, taking the number you roll, and adding it to your unit's movement stat for that turn. So, if I roll a 4 on my advance roll on a unit that usually moves 6 inches, they get to move 10 inches for that turn. However, if you advance a unit, they will not be able to fire their weapons or charge unless they have specific weapons or abilities that say they can. So be aware when you choose to advance your units. Now, we move on to... Once you are done moving all of your units, you will go into the shooting phase. Each unit has their weapon stats on their datasheet that tell you range, how many attacks the weapon gets, the strength of that weapon, the armor penetration of that weapon, and how much damage that weapon does. Some weapons even get special abilities, but we are focused only on what you do during shooting. When shooting at an enemy unit, you must be in range of that target while being able to draw a line of sight. Then you use your weapon's profile's attack stat to determine how many dice per model you roll. So if my squad of 5 Marines gets 2 shots for their bolters, I'll be rolling 10 d6 total. You take the result of these rolls and compare them to your weapon's ballistic skill to see if your unit hits their targets. So if my Marines hit on 3+, then any rolls of 3 or higher will be a hit, while a 1 and 2 are misses and are discarded. Once we know how many attacks have hit, we have to determine how many wounds we inflict on the target. To do this, we compare the strength of our weapon against the enemy's toughness. We have a helpful chart here to tell people what to roll when comparing strength to toughness. If they are equal, you need to roll a 4 or higher. If strength exceeds toughness, it's 3 or higher. If it's double, it's 2 or higher. But if the toughness is better than the strength, it's 5 or higher, and if it's doubled, it's 6. So my Marines are firing at this orc unit. The orcs have a toughness of 4 to my bolter's strength of 4, so we must roll 4s or higher to hurt the orcs. Once that's done, our opponent has to roll to save against any wounds I rolled. When making a save, you check your unit's armor value. For orcs, their save is 5 or higher, so usually they will have to roll a 5 or a 6 to ignore the damage done to them. However, if a weapon that did a wound has AP, you worsen the save stat by that number. So if my bolters had AP -1, we worsen the chance to save the orcs by 1. Now the orcs have to roll a 6 or take damage. Every unsaved wound does damage equal to the weapon's damage stat, and if a model's wounds are reduced to 0, they are removed from the game. There are units in the game that get something called an invulnerable save, which is a save that cannot be affected by AP. So when shooting at units, be aware if they have a save like that. Now, we get into...
Die, scum! No prisoners! For the Emperor! Ah!
Once all units have shot, you will be able to charge at the enemy if your units are in range to do so. Units must be within 12 inches of their target to declare a charge, and you must declare which units are charging before you roll for each individual unit. Once you have declared which units are charging, you will roll 2d6 for each unit declared. You need at least one model to make it into base-to-base contact with an enemy model to succeed in the charge. So if my Marines wish to charge the remaining orcs in front of them, and the remaining orcs are 7 inches away, I have to roll a 7 or higher to succeed. If I roll a 7 or higher, the charge is successful, and we move each model as many inches as we rolled and get them as close as possible to enemy models. However, if I failed the charge, the unit does not move towards the target at all and remains where they are. Now that charging is done, we move into... The fight phase is basically the shooting phase, but instead of shooting, we're punching people. You follow the same steps you took in the shooting phase, but just apply them here, using the weapon skill instead of the ballistic skill. All charging units get to attack first, then any unit that is still alive after the charge gets to fight back. Pretty simple, all things considered.
Run away! Run away! Run away!
Once you are done fighting, you will end your turn and your opponent will have to go through the same steps you just went through during their turn, but with an extra step in the command phase. Since their Orc Boys unit took over half casualties to their unit, they will have to roll a leadership check. When rolling leadership, you take your unit's leadership stat and roll 2d6 against it. If you roll equal to or higher, then your leadership has succeeded, and the unit braves it out. If you fail, that unit is considered to be broken and cannot hold objectives or be affected by stratagems. So for example, the Orc Boys unit we beat the tar out of has to roll a 7 or higher to pass their leadership, but our opponent has rolled a 5, so his Orc Boys are broken and they cannot be affected by stratagems. Then your opponent will have to do the rest of their turn following the same order you did. Once your opponent is done with their turn and the round is over, you then go back and forth and repeat this for about 5 to 6 rounds, or until one of you runs out of living models, and then the game ends.
Your services are no longer required.
Now, this is just the basic guide. We didn't go over keywords or special abilities because we just want you to get used to moving units and hitting each other. Games Workshop has released a quick start rule set for newcomers to print off and use, so go ahead and print that off if you need a quick refresher of the rules. More advanced stuff will be there, like keywords for units and weapons. But go off now and conquer the tables with your favorite armies! And if you want to learn how to play the armies, either go back to my previous videos or stay tuned, because the next video after this, we will be looking at the Emperor's own bodyguards, the Adeptus Custodes. See you next time.